Meeting of Bangor City's Planning Board. My name is Ted Brush. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board. Chairman Reese Perkins is currently out of town and unavailable for the meeting. Other board members in attendance this evening are alternate member Janet Jonas, Michael Bazinet, Don Mahar, and Trish Hayes. Alternate member Jonas will be filling in for and voting for Chair Perkins. Board members are volunteers from the community. City staff members in attendance this evening include Planning Officer Anya Colette, Assistant Solicitor Grace Innes, and Planning Analyst Brian Scannell. We thank them all for their help with this meeting. Planning Board has multiple roles. First, we review amendments to the Land Development Code, which typically include either changes to zoning districts or changes to text within the code. Our review of these amendments includes adherence to the most recently amended comprehensive plan and is in the form of a recommendation to the City Council as to whether the item ought to pass or ought not to pass. The City Council makes a final decision on the Land Development Code changes. And since we only have 5 members tonight, we still require four votes to pass a code change. Second, we serve as a regulatory authority for land development permits, commonly known as site review plan. The plans are reviewed to ensure compliance with the city code in terms of parking, driveways, stormwater management, lighting, landscaping and buffering, building location, environmental impacts, and shoreline zoning as may be applicable. We also ensure the plan meets the dimensional requirements for the project's zoning district. These items require a majority, which in our case would be 3 votes to pass. The Land Development Code can be found on the city's website. I'd like to remind everyone to please silence your cell phones. We'll call the applicants in order that they appear on the agenda. The applicant is asked to present their project or proposal. They or their representatives should come forward to the podium and provide a brief introduction to their application. Once the presentation has been made, the applicant should stay at the podium while we consider any questions from the staff and or board members. At that time, the applicant may be seated and we will open the floor to public comments if there are any from the public. We ask that the person come to the podium, introduce themselves, where they are from, and indicate if they are for or against the proposal. If against the proposal is also helpful, if you present reasons for your opposition based on the city code or the comprehensive plan, as these will be the primary documents used by the board when making our decisions. If you are on Zoom, and I think we have a couple people, please use the raise hand function to let us know you would like to speak, and we can bring you in to the meeting. All comments and discussions should remain respectful and considerate of all others. Once public comments are completed, we will close the item to public comments. The board will then deliberate on the proposal using the standards as applicable and act on the proposal. The board may approve or deny the project and may otherwise work with the applicant if there are compliance issues that could be addressed with modifications to the plan. The board may continue the application to a future meeting in order for the applicant to modify the plan or for any other reasonable cause. If someone disagrees with the decision of the board regarding a site development project that's a permit, they have the right to appeal the decision to the Superior Court of Maine. Once a project you are interested in has been reviewed, you are free to leave the meeting, but also are welcome to stay for other project reviews. When leaving, please be respectfully quiet, as there may be other project reviews being considered. All projects, once approved by the board, must apply for construction permits with the code office. All approved projects need to be started within 1 year of our decision and completed within 2 years. Extensions for good cause may be granted through the code office. We thank all participants for taking the time to present their project for review. This process is important for the city's development and direction for our future. Okay, now we go to the agenda. And the first item is Land Development Code amendment to amend the Land Development Code by changing a parcel of land located at 12 Carroll Street, map 24, lot 110, from Urban Resident District URD1 to Urban Residence District 2, URD2. Said area contains approximately 0.19 acres total. Applicant is Francisco Pimenta, and the owner is James Stoneton. Is the applicant here? Would they like to make a presentation?
I believe they're on Zoom, so
Okay,
we're pulling
can you
them.
bring them in?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm very computer illiterate. I'm sorry. I don't know if you guys can see me or not, but I am here.
And what's your name?
Francisco Pimenta.
Okay, Francisco, take her away.
Yes, today we are just trying to get the zone changed in order to build a 3-unit apartment building on 12 Carroll Street.
Okay. Are you done? Anything else to say? Did we?
Are you guys speaking to me?
Yes.
Is there any other, do you have
Are
a
you-
question?
I think Vice Chair Brush was just asking if you were finished or if you had anything else.
Oh, no, that's it for now.
Okay, I do have a question. This area is predominantly URD1. Several blocks away, there are a couple URD2 zones. However, it mentions that there are many non-conforming, legally non-conforming multi-dwelling units. Let me ask you, can you describe how prevalent those are around your property?
Quite prevalent, it looks like to me. There's actually 2 other multi-units right across the street that actually have more than 3 units, is what we were looking at, is why we went through all this to think that we could maybe possibly be able to do so. So I think the one building to the left across the street has maybe 5 or 7 units in it, and then the one directly across the street looks to be about 4 to 5 units.
Okay, thank you.
And then to the right of us, maybe 1 block is where the URD2 zoning does start.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Vice Chair.
Okay, so with that, I'm gonna.
Vice Chair,
Oh, you gotta
Just a quick
speak up.
question. I'm sorry. I actually have a question because I'm new. Would this change, because it's not contiguous with the URD, to actually be spot zoning?
Technically, under the definition of spot zoning, yes, but spot zoning isn't necessarily it can be desirable depending on the situation. You more so want to look at whether this aligns with the comprehensive plan. And, this is in the urban neighborhood district that is supposed to accommodate high-density housing in the comprehensive plan. And we also do have other zones. URD2 isn't technically one of them, but we do have other zones that are kind of spotty, if you will, like the government zone, neighborhood service district. They are often placed in an area and surrounded by a different zone just because of the nature of that zone. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna open this now to the public, if there are any. Is there anybody in the house who wants to speak? Anybody on Zoom? It doesn't look like we have any public comments. Any further review or comments from the board or discussion on it? No? Okay, so this, I'll close the public comments then. And this one, the motion for this should be an ought to pass motion. So can I have a motion on it, please?
Yes, Mr.
Member
Chair.
Maher?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'd make a motion to recommend to the city council to amend the land development code by changing a parcel of land located at 12 Carroll Street, map lot 24-110, from urban residence 1 to urban residence 2 district.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we'll have a roll call vote. Member Mahar,
Yes.
Member Hayes,
Yes.
Member Bazinet,
Yes.
Member Jonas,
Yes.
and the vice chair votes yes. So now we will recommend to the council that this ought to pass. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're going to go on to amend the land development code by reducing restrictions on setbacks and dimensional requirements for auxiliary dwelling units, ADUs, by clarifying the minimum structure size in accordance with LD 2003. And just as a note, this one is a code change, so it would require 4 votes from the board. Are you going to
Yep.
present, Anya?
Yep, I will. This was an issue that came to our attention recently with somebody that wanted to put in an ADU. Our current code stipulates that ADUs can't be located in front of a main house. And by nature, like in certain situations, for example, if the house is located at the back of a lot, in essence, this makes the front setback greater for the ADU than it does for the house, which is not allowed according to LD 2003. And the other thing we noticed is that there is a height restriction on ADUs that is much more restrictive than for primary dwellings. And so that's another aspect that was out of compliance with LD 2003. So we went through and proposed removing those restrictions. And that's in essence what this is for, so.
Thank you. So are there any questions or comments from the staff, from the board? Any discussion?
One quick question, Mr. Chair. Anya, what's the impact if we don't adopt this?
Well, we would be out of compliance with LD 2003 state law, so.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, we would be open to lawsuits if
Okay.
we.
that's what I needed to
Yeah.
hear. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And let me open then to the public, for public comments. Is there anybody in-house who wants to comment on this? And how about on Zoom? Any comments? Seeing none, I will close the public comments and call for a motion. And this is again, it's a code change, so we need 4 votes, and it's an ought to pass motion. Anybody?
Chair, I'll make a motion. This is to City Council, ought to pass to amend the code of the City of Bangor by reducing restrictions on setbacks and dimensional requirements for accessory dwelling units, ADUs, and clarifying the minimum structure size in accordance with LD 2003.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Mahar,
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the vice chair votes yes. It's approved, and we will recommend the city ought to pass that code change. Okay, now moving on to item number 3 on the agenda. It's a land development permit. Again, we're gonna require a majority vote, which is 3 people. It's a land development permit application for a site development plan to reconstruction of an existing parking lot to eliminate 2 curb cuts on Union Street, improve internal circulation slightly reduce impervious area at the property located at 516 Union Street, map lot 12-091 in Urban Residence District URD 1. Applicant is the Bangor Church of Christ, and owner, Bangor Church of Christ. So the staff has indicated the completeness of this application and is ready for the board review, but that's something we have to vote on. Fees are documented and paid, applicant standing is confirmed. Does the board have any concern with these issues? Are there any concerns with conflicts of interest? Hearing none. If not, I'll call for a roll vote on the application completeness. So, Member Mahar?
Yes, I would make a motion that the planning board deems the application complete on April 2nd, 2004, that the applicant has paid all applicable fees that would be shown in Exhibit 4, and that the proposed project is a major site development.
Thank you.
Second that.
Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Okay, roll call vote on the completeness. Member Mahar?
Yes?
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And Vice, did I get Hayes? I got you.
Yeah.
Sorry. And Vice Chair votes yes also, so we deem it, the application is complete. So, is there any representative from the applicant here who wants to present the project before we move to a vote on the standards? Here we go.
That would be me. And I'm gonna do what Fred did last week, and I'm just gonna use a chair. Somebody else has the easel this week. I'm gonna pick this up because it's bothering.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Young, Plymouth Engineering here representing Bangor Church of Christ, 516 Union Street. Pretty much covered what it's gonna entail is, this is the existing conditions right here. You have the building with gravel parking coming out onto Union Street, and we are proposing, I think this one, to pave the parking lot, have actually marked parking spaces, have the entrance come out on Manners Avenue, and have, and part of the project is to reconstruct the sidewalk along Union Street and to add plantings to buffer the church from the abutting residences. In the staff review, it was noted that there is a slight nonconformance on one of the sides due to the existing parking lot being too close, but an agreement was brought between the staff and the owner as to plantings will be provided to provide the most extensive buffer that can be without losing any parking on the site.
Thank you. Are there any staff comments on it?
No, not yet.
How about other board members have questions or comments? And the public, do you have anybody from the public who has a comment on this? Anybody here? Here? How about on Zoom? Okay. So I'm going to close the public comments then. And do any of the board members have any issues they'd like to bring up before we vote? Now, it says it's on page 61 of our packet. It's with all the green highlighting. We're gonna go through each of the standards and vote on them. First one is that the project meets requirements in Articles 2 through 12. I have a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Meyer.
Yes, I move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2, and Exhibit 6, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, Section 165-19's requirements surrounding non-conforming parking.
May I have a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Member Bazinet. Roll call, Member Mahar,
Yes.
Member Hayes,
Yes.
Member Bazinet,
Yes,
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair, yes. So, second one is number 2 on
Mr. Chair,
erosion, yes.
I'll move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheets C2 through C3, Exhibit 7, and Exhibit 10, the applicant has satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-33.1's requirements surrounding erosion and sediment control.
Second.
Thank you. A roll call vote. Member Mahar,
Yes.
Member Hayes,
Yes.
Member Bazinet,
Yes,
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. Third item is on vehicle visual clearance. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Member Bazinet?
I'll move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-62's requirement of providing adequate vehicular visual clearance.
Second.
Roll call vote. Member Mahar,
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes,
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. Okay, the item number 4 is side yards.
Chair?
Member Mahar.
Yes, I move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, Section 165-64, requirement that front yard setback regulations apply to side yards when the side yard is adjacent to a street.
Second.
second. Sorry,
Thank you,
Member Jonas,
Member
please.
Bazinet. Roll call. Member Mahar.
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes,
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. Okay, the 5th one is on parking. May I have a motion?
Chair, I'll make the motion.
Member Hayes?
I'll make the motion that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2, the am I on, is this the right
Yeah.
one? Okay, sorry. Let me try this again. I'll make the motion that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165 through 72, requiring 1 parking space for every 200 square feet of assembly area and a minimum 1 handicap accessible space.
Second.
Thank you. Member Jonas? Okay, roll call vote. Member Mahar?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Bazinet?
yes,
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. Item 6 is again on parking, and second setbacks.
Mr. Chair, one item, real quick.
Number 6.
Do we need to keep the applicant standing for the whole time, or?
No, you,
I'm good.
Okay,
thank you.
okay,
I sit at a desk all day, I'm good.
All right.
I actually did a loop around the city forest before I came here, so.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-73 regarding parking area location, setbacks, and screening.
Second.
Thank you, Member Mahar. Roll call vote, Member Mahar,
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. Okay, the next one is item 7 requiring, again on parking design.
Mr. Chair,
Member Mahar.
I move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, Section 165-74, requiring minimum design standards for surface parking and parking lot design.
And a second?
Second that.
Thank you. Roll call vote, Member Mahar.
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. The last item in part 1 is surface water, provisions for surface water and storm drainage. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll move the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheets C2 through C3, and Exhibits 7, 9, and 10, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, Section 165-84, requiring provisions for surface water and storm drainage.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, Member Mahar.
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. So that concludes part 1. We move on to part 2, which is the project meets the district site development standards under Article 14. And there's one item there, it's on the impervious surface. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Mahar.
I move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheets C2 and C4, and Exhibit 7, the applicant satisfied Section 165-135 of the Land Development Code regarding impervious surface ratio and buffer yards.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Member Jonas. Roll call vote, Member Mahar.
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. So that concludes part 2. Moving on to part 3, the project meets requirements for section 165-88 Urban Residence 1 District, URD 1. So there's one item under that, and it's refers to the requirements of URD 1.
Mr. Chair,
Member Bazinet.
I'll move the board finds that based on the findings made in parts 1 and 2 of this document, the project meets the requirements of section 165-88 for an accessory use within the urban residence district, otherwise known as URD1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, Member Mahar.
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
And Vice Chair votes yes. Moving on to part 4, which is requirements for section 165-114 land development approval standards. And there are 3 items under this one. First one is a reasonable site configuration. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Member Mahar.
I move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet 2, the applicant satisfied the requirements of the Land Development Code in section 165-114B through C regarding the proposed parking and loading layout and the proposed access drives from the site to any public right-of-way being arranged in a reasonable and safe configuration.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second?
Member Bazinet. Roll call. Member Mahar.
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Bazinet.
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. Item number 2, which is downstream properties. May I
Mr.
have a
Chair?
motion? Yes, Member Bazinet.
I'll move the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheets C2 through C3, Exhibit 7, Exhibit 9, and Exhibit 10, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114.D's requirement that stormwater runoff from the proposed development will not have an unreasonable adverse effect on abutting or downstream properties or protected resources, and that all downstream channels or municipal stormwater collection systems have adequate capacity to carry the flow without significant negative effects.
May I have a second?
Second,
Thank you. Roll call vote, Member Mahar?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. And the last item here is landscaping.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Member Mahar.
I move that the board finds that based on Exhibit 3, Sheet C2 and C4, and Exhibit 7, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, Section 165-114.F's requirement for landscaping.
May I have a second?
Second.
Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote, Member Mahar?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Bazinet?
Yes?
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. So that concludes. Now we move on to our decision. May I have a motion?
Chair, I make the motion that the board finds that the project meets the requirements for a land development permit for a major site development, and therefore the board grants the land development permit for the proposed project.
May I have a second?
Second.
Member Jonas. Roll call vote, Member Mahar?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Vice Chair votes yes. We have rendered a decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now, other business. The first item is climate plan presentation. We're gonna do that tonight?
Yes, me and Maddie will do that.
Hi, everyone. You don't know me. My name is Natty Jensen, and I'm a planner with BACS, which stands for the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation System, BACS for short, obviously. I'm the project manager for Penobscot Climate Action, with obviously on the, representing the city of Bangor, and then also alongside the town of Orono and University of Maine. Sorry.
Do you want the?
I don't know,
Easier.
yeah, let's
Easier.
do that. Thank you. So very briefly, Penobscot Climate Action is a regional planning effort that the city of Bangor, town of Orono, University of Maine, and BACS we're working on together to outline the changing conditions that we might be able to expect with changing climate, as well as outline a baseline greenhouse gas emissions for this region. And that helps us figure out who and what is at risk locally. And then also we wanted to develop specific strategies that would help us make our community and our infrastructure more resilient and reduce our emissions alongside state goals. So this slide just very briefly outlines the deliverables for both phase 1 and phase 2 of this project, though tonight we'll just be focusing on phase 2, which is where the strategy development came into play. We've recommended 41, I believe, strategies throughout this plan, and we'll just be discussing the ones that are most relevant to you all tonight. So of the 41 strategies, 10 of them received what we call the toolkit treatment. They have very specific resources, steps for implementation, key partners, perhaps funding opportunities that we hope will help implement these strategies quickly and easily. And so we split up the toolkits into these category areas that we identified as being really relevant to this region. So we have housing and buildings, transportation, local economies and livelihoods, environment, and health. And so as I mentioned, each of the toolkits really build out resources, and including steps for implementation, key partners, precedents or examples from elsewhere that we can use as a jumping off point.
So I'm gonna go over some of the individual toolkits. Toolkit number 1 is one of the most impactful toolkits in the plan because buildings account for about 60% of the region's emissions. And so toolkits 1 and 2 really focus on how we can reduce emissions from buildings. Toolkit number 1 especially focuses on zoning and land development. So what we would be looking at with that is looking at ways in the zoning that we can encourage, or in some cases maybe require, people to use materials in their buildings that have a low amount of embodied carbon. And then also ways that we can encourage more lower carbon throughout the operating lifetime of a building. So just, is it gonna be more efficient with heating and cooling and things like that? And then other parts of this toolkit involve looking at ways to make development more resilient to things like flooding. So we'd be looking at things like discouraging development in the floodplain and making sure that buildings that are in the floodplain now are more resilient to flooding in the future. And then also looking at how we can have developers design sites to be more resilient. So looking at their landscaping requirements. Do they need, more trees, for example, to help shade the building to kind of offset some of those temperature swings? Maybe we can find ways to encourage things like green roofs, because green roofs can help really moderate a building's temperature so it's more resilient to high heat days or very cold days. And it can also help reduce the heating and cooling load, which will reduce emissions. And so, yeah, that's generally what we'd be looking at with toolkit number 1. Toolkit number 5 really focuses on creating what we call complete neighborhoods, where people can walk and bike to their destinations more easily. They can take transit more easily. And so this involves things like zoning for increased density and zoning for mixed uses in our growth area that we have in our comprehensive plan. And, because having denser, more mixed-use neighborhoods means that people don't have to walk as far to get to their destination, which means they don't have to drive as much. And so that makes the neighborhood more resilient and also lowers emissions. And then also, if we can encourage development to occur closer to transit, and maybe certain types of development we want to require to be closer to transit, that will encourage people to hopefully take our bus system and encourage ridership and things like that. And then going beyond zoning, looking at adopting probably a complete streets policy, so that anytime we make a major, investment in our road, or we're doing major maintenance, we're making that road incorporate more pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and more street trees and things like that. So this toolkit is really focused more on resilience, more so than emissions. It's really focused on conserving land, especially our forests, our wetlands, our agricultural land, because food security was one thing that people were really concerned about, and people are also concerned about losing our forest and our important habitat and things like that. And also our forests actually sequester about 1/3 of our emissions in the region, so it's really important that we keep those intact. So when it comes to a zoning standpoint, we would be looking at requiring that, for example, when subdivisions come in, the required open space in those subdivisions aligns with these really important ecosystems, whether that's wetlands, forest, or just important habitat that's been designated by the state. And then maybe we want to require or encourage cluster subdivisions in the rural parts of the city, so that you have more condensed development and you have more open space outside of that development. And then also from an agricultural standpoint, just making sure that, our zoning really protects our current farms that we have in the city. Other places use like agricultural overlay zones. And so those areas in that overlay zone have specific rules around them to really encourage the preservation of the farms. And there's many other ways too to also protect farmland. But once those prime farmland soils are gone, they're gone forever when they're developed. So, and I think that was everything on that one. As far as our additional strategies, we do have a list of additional strategies that are outside of the toolkits. And so these focus on a wide array of things, from increasing energy efficiency for housing to facilitating expansion of rooftop solar. I'll be going over in my next agenda item proposing to exempt rooftop solar from the maximum building height. That can help facilitate rooftop solar. And then also looking at how do we accommodate solar array, like utility scale solar arrays, but also protect farmland and protect habitat and things like that. Because you do see a lot of solar arrays going in on farmland, and so that's something we want to address. And then also possibly looking at EV charging requirements, whether that's for off-street parking, maybe they have to be wired to accommodate EV charging in the future, or just buildings in general having that accommodation. And then some additional strategies to tackle resilience. We might want to look at doing a historic preservation and resilience plan, because we do have a lot of historic buildings in the floodplain, especially downtown. And there are ways to both preserve those historic resources and flood-proof them. And the areas downtown are like the most vulnerable to flooding in the city, so we really want to look hard at those areas. Also, updating our stormwater design standards and ordinances. We're going to have to adopt a low impact development ordinance regardless, because we are an MS4 community, and DEP is going to require that MS4 communities adopt a low impact development ordinance. That's still going through various processes right now, but that will help us address this recommendation in the climate plan. And then reducing barriers to things like urban farms and community gardens and things like that. We don't really have zoning barriers to community gardens, but there are probably things we can do to encourage more urban farms, food stands and things like that. And so that's something that we're gonna look at later as well.
All right, thanks, Sonia.
Yep.
Are there any questions about the specific strategies? I know that's a lot of content.
I do have a question. What role do you see for the planning board in this planning process?
So I was gonna get to that at the end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But it's okay. We are gonna start on the implementation of the comprehensive plan soon and the land use plan. And so we'll be tackling a lot of the things that I just mentioned when we get to that process. But there may also just be standalone ordinances that we bring to the planning board that address some of these things, so.
Do you see those affecting the permitting process? Or
Yes.
And the code definitions? Or-
Yes, definitely. Maybe some of them may not impact the permitting process, but some strategies definitely would, so.
Anything else? All right, great. Now on to some greenhouse gas modeling. And so, as I discussed in the first phase, we outlined a baseline for emissions for this region, figuring out, what quantity of emissions are associated with the communities of this region, where the sources are, what sectors. And so in phase 2, we wanted to look at how the strategies that we recommended through this process impact our overall emissions. And so I apologize, the graph is very, very small for you all, but you can see the little colored wedges on the map show the different policies represented in this plan, as well as some other major state and federal policies that are coming through that are going to have the biggest impact on our emissions. And so there are also, if you can barely see, there's 2 horizontal lines. The top one is kind of a teal color. That shows the 45% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions goal by 2030 that the state has, that's the state's goal. It's also the city of Bangor's goal. They passed a resolution in 2021 committing to that. And then the line below it, the darker green, shows the goal of reducing our emissions by 80% by 2050. So those 2 goals are what the state and the city have outlined. You can see that in the current assumptions of the model that our consultants worked on, we're just barely not reaching those goals by 2050. We're at about a 73% emissions reductions rather than 80% like our goal states. But that really just tells us that we need to be considering these things, perhaps adopting them more rapidly, or considering what ways or what additional ways that we can be reducing our emissions, what we can do as a region, not just the city, to be pursuing this more rapidly and aggressively. Any questions about the modeling? Okay, And then I just wanted to briefly outline the actions to get started that we are recommending to all the communities in the region that we're working with. I was just at Bangor GovOps Committee last night, and so we're recommending that folks identify a local game plan. So that might look like the city or staff or this board making, thinking about what specific goals that you guys have for the near term. And then also passing a resolution committing to these goals and the emissions reductions. The city of Bangor is ahead of the game on that. Some of the other towns in the region have yet to do that. And then finally, BACS as an organization is going to be creating a climate action committee, which we're hoping will bring together the municipalities in the region, as well as some of the major institutions, community-based organizations, and residents who've participated in this planning process. We heard a lot from folks that they want to keep this work going, and we need support to do that. We need to share resources, and so we're hoping that this committee will be a good opportunity to bring folks together to talk about this. And that's all I have. Any questions? Do you have anything else to add, Anya?
I don't, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the workshop on increases in height limits. Anya?
Yep. So this is bringing back a proposal that came before you last summer. Originally, we had proposed to increase the height in the multifamily and service district to 60 feet in general. There were concerns at the time about the impact that could have on adjacent smaller homes and like URD1 and URD2. So we have revised the proposal to where it would be 60 feet in MNSD where it's on major or minor arterial streets. And then on top of that, also changing the height in USD to also be 60 feet, just generally. And USD already is primarily on major and minor arterial streets. It's also primarily next to these same parcels where the height would be increasing. And I will say the current height in MNSD is 45 feet, so that would be a 15-foot difference, and then USD is 35 feet. And the primary purpose of this is just to allow some of the extra density that I was just talking about. For example, allowing the extra height can allow more additional dwelling units to be added, especially in MNSD. USD does allow mixed commercial residential, so that's also a possibility there. And then adding that flexibility for rooftop mechanical equipment and rooftop solar arrays to be exempted from the height can also make certain affordable housing projects more feasible, but it also just made sense from a common sense perspective. I will note though, after discussing this with the bed committee last night, one member at least did have a preference that mechanical equipment be screened on the rooftop. So just wanted to put that out there as a potential revision, but I'm open to hearing feedback or questions or anything like that, so.
Screening meaning for it to
Screening,
look better?
yeah, so maybe like a wall on the rooftop that would screen it, something like that, like a fence. I'm not sure exactly what it would look like, but just some way to block off the view of the mechanical equipment on the rooftop.
We do have environmental considerations such as snow and wind and those types of things, so that would have to be carefully consulted with a building architect and or the mechanical people that are doing the install.
As far as screening or just in general?
What to do to accomplish what you're talking about. But, with some of these crazy storms that we have now,
Yeah,
it may not be practical in all instances unless it's designed properly.
yeah, I do think there's a lot of cities though that do, we already allow mechanical equipment, it's just that it counts towards your building height. So
Right.
all we would be doing is taking that out of the building height equation.
Yeah, the mechanical equipment is bolted and part of the structure, but the screening is more of an aesthetic thing, right?
Yeah,
So that you don't actually see most of it.
right,
So if that's not done properly, then that could be problems,
right,
yeah.
okay,
Added costs for the builders,
Yeah.
that type of thing, so.
yeah.
All things to consider.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
So now we have adoption of two actions, notice of decisions that the board took on the 19th of March. These are both permits, so they both require a majority vote. First one is notice of decision on the project at 230 Beaumont Road.
Mr. Vice Chair, as a point of order,
Yes.
I was not a voting member at that particular meeting. Am I permitted to vote at this meeting for this?
So, yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I was just asking if you're allowed to sign without all the members present.
Yeah, I
If we
feel
should
like
postpone it to.
you could, I don't think there's any harm in postponing it if you would prefer to do that.
Right, just since, you're missing 3 people and
Yeah,
That'd be the safe
you
bet.
are voting.
Oh, yeah, so we have two of those. Can I have a motion on that then?
Mr. Chair, motion to postpone the agenda item until the next meeting.
It's the two agenda items.
The 2 agenda items until the next meeting.
Item 6 and 7.
Item 6 and 7.
And can I have a
Second?
second one? And let's have just a show of hands for agreeing to postpone, yes. We didn't set a date for that, but I guess it kind of depends on.
well, I mean, you can go with the next meeting and assume that everybody will be here.
Yeah, see who's present.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to the meeting minutes. And we have 2 minutes to consider, the 5th and the 19th. So, let's tackle the 5th first. I wasn't here, so I will not be voting on that one.
I would move approval of the meeting minutes of the March 5th, 2024 meeting.
Second that?
Thank you. Let's have a show of hands for approval. Okay, it's showing four votes for approving that. Okay, March 19th. Let's have can we have a motion on the minutes or any discussion, corrections, modifications? If not, let's have a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair, I motion that we approve the meeting minutes of
Thank you. Second.
March 9th, what was the date?
It's March 19th.
March 19th.
March 19th.
Second?
Thank you, Member Mahar. Show of hands for approval. That's it, all 5 voting for that. Thank you, so those minutes are approved. And that brings us to the adjournment. Without further ado, I declare the meeting adjourned.
There
Thank
we
you.
go.
Well done tonight, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.